Hello and welcome to the 74th edition of the GreenWave podcast by SYNI International. I'm SYNI, your host, and today's pod is titled Europe's Water Bill is Arriving. Europe's climate debate has a new sound. A dry tap, a tanker outside a school, a cafe shutting during a holiday week because the water pressure has collapsed. The live issue is water failure in a rich region during early summer heat. Amid rising customer water bills, the deeper system problem is that Europe built too much of its water politics around transitory cheapness, comfort and delay, then asked old pipes and stressed catchments to absorb climate change. Today is World Environment Day, with climate change at the centre of the global programme in Baku, Azerbaijan, to celebrate this year's theme, Inspired by Nature, for Climate, for Our Future. Speeches will be made, logos will be displayed. Important politicians will stand beside a screen with a river on it and use the word resilience with a straight face. The hard facts on the ground are that Europe's water system needs pipe crews, treatment capacity, river restoration, chemical cleanup, metering, reservoirs, sewer upgrades, leakage control, planning consent and money. Quite a lot of money. The clearest warning came from southeast England a few weeks ago. More than 20,000 people were left without water or with low pressure after record heat, and a dry spring pushed demand through weak infrastructure. Around 8,000 people were affected in Whitstable, a lovely tourist village, but where businesses had to shut during a busy holiday period. That is the kind of climate story voters understand instantly. No abstract PowerPoint, just a dry sink, an unusable toilet, and an apology from a water company. Southeast Water said demand had surged and storage was low. Residents heard a different sentence. They heard, "You had years to prepare, the weather got hot, and the system folded." This is the uncomfortable part. Climate change is making water stress harsher, but climate change is also becoming a useful shield for weak asset management. A hot week can expose a poor network. It does not absolve the people paid to run it. More problems are showing up in the UK. The Drinking Water Inspectorate's April conclusion on an incident in Tunbridge Wells, a leafy suburb in Kent, was sharper than the usual regulatory fog. The loss of supply and boil water notice affecting up to 60,170 consumers in late 2025 were described as foreseeable and preventable. The weaknesses sat in operational management, treatment control, monitoring, maintenance, and emergency planning. That phrase, foreseeable and preventable, should hang over the whole sector. It turns a weather event into a management event. It turns a crisis response problem into a capital allocation problem. It turns the public mood from inconvenience into anger. And anger is now part of the water economy. For us at SYNI International, water has become one of Europe's clearest adaptation tests because it joins physical climate risk with household bills, regulated returns and political trust. It is pipes and pumps, but it is also debt, dividends, permits, land, farms, factories, data centres, insurers and local elections. Water has lived for too long as invisible infrastructure. Electricity gets pylons, rail gets platforms, airports get runways, water gets noticed when it disappears, smells wrong, floods a street, closes a beach, poisons a river, or arrives in plastic bottles at a leisure centre car park. That invisibility shaped the politics. Keep bills low, defer the unpopular works, patch the network, push the reservoir decision into another planning cycle, hope rain comes before scrutiny does. Now, the bill has arrived. In England and Wales, the Water Services Regulatory Authority 2024 price review approved £104 billion of water and wastewater investment for 2025 to 2030. Average bills will rise by £31 a year before inflation, or £157 over 5 years, with the average bill reaching £597 by 2030. That number is doing two jobs. It is paying for overdue infrastructure, and it is reminding households that yesterday's cheapness can become tomorrow's surcharge. Yet the fairness problem is brutal. Customers are being asked to pay more after years of pollution arguments, leakage complaints, supply interruptions, executive pay controversies, and investor disputes. Try selling that at a kitchen table after someone queued for bottled water in a heatwave. The room will not be gentle. The hard truth remains. Water assets need to be funded by somebody. Bill payers, taxpayers, shareholders, bondholders, developers, industrial users, or future residents with worse service and higher costs. The system can move the invoice around, but it cannot make the invoice vanish. That is where the UK argument often loses discipline. Public anger at poor company performance is justified. Public anger at higher bills is understandable. Public belief that the upgrade can be funded painlessly is fantasy with a standing charge. Truth is, water is capital heavy. Treatment works, mains replacement, storm tank, sewers, reservoirs, and water transfers need upfront cash. Lenders want a return. Regulators want lower bills and better service. Ministers want no scandal on the evening news. Customers want clean water, clean rivers, and a bill that does not land like a council tax ambush. Everyone wants the pipe fixed. Fewer people want to open the bill. The wider European picture is no more comfortable. The European Environment Agency says water stress affects 20% of Europe's territory and 30% of its population every year. In 2021, only 37% of Europe's surface water bodies reached good or high ecological status, and only 29% reached good chemical status. That is a poor report card for a continent that often speaks as though water management is a settled administrative task. The failures sit in rivers carrying farm, nutrients and pesticides, in cities with overloaded sewers, in aquifers being drawn down faster than they recharge, and in catchments where every new housing scheme, logistics park, factory, tourist bed and irrigation licence expects the tap to comply. Agriculture sits at the centre of this because it uses water and it pollutes water. That makes the politics sensitive immediately. Farmers face heat, drought, input costs, food price pressure and public scrutiny. Asking them to reduce nutrient runoff and use less water is easy in a strategy paper. On a farm balance sheet, it means equipment, risk, advice, altered practice, and sometimes lower output. Water-intensive industry faces the same squeeze. Energy needs cooling. Semiconductors need ultra-clean water. Chemicals, food processing, paper, metals, batteries, green hydrogen and data centres all ask for reliable supply and discharge permits. Growth plans look neat until a river basin says no. This is where water must enter industrial policy as a hard constraint. A site selection model that checks power price, labour, road access and tax treatment, then treats water as a minor utility connection, is asking for trouble. Data centres make the point neatly. Europe wants digital capacity and artificial intelligence investment. Those facilities need power, cooling, land, fibre and water in different mixes depending on design. A region can chase the tax base and the jobs, then find itself explaining to local residents why a server hall has a stronger water plan than a village. The politics of that will be ugly. The European Commission's water resilience strategy puts the scale in plain terms. By 2030, global water demand is expected to exceed available resources by 40%. The EU also sees a commercial opening. Europe's water industry generates €107 billion and supports 1.7 million jobs, and Europe holds a large share of water technology patents. That is the useful tension. Water is a public good, a regulated service, and a growth sector. It is the thing every household needs, and it is also a market for sensors, membranes, pumps, software, civil engineering, chemicals, nature recovery, monitoring, insurance, and project finance. The clean tech crowd should pay attention. Batteries and solar panels get the glamour. Water gets sludge, man-made chemical filters, leak detection, and storm overflow works. Water infrastructure wears a high-vis jacket and gets wet socks. Very unfashionable, very bankable when the rules are stable. Digital water tools are now moving up the policy agenda. The Commission has opened consultation on a digital action plan for the water sector until the 24th of June. Smart meters can cut water use by up to 25%, digital systems can save another 5% to 8%, and leak detection can reduce consumption by a further 7% to 14%. Those numbers are useful because they convert water management from lecture to cash flow. A leak found early means less treated water lost into the ground, lower pumping costs, lower energy use, lower abstraction pressure, and fewer emergency repairs. A smart meter gives a household or business a signal before the bill becomes a nasty little novel. Meters can show pressure changes. Mains still need replacement. Sensors can flag trouble. Reservoirs still need consent. Software can map per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, a group of man-made chemicals utilised in water treatment since the 1940s, known as PFAS. Treatment still needs equipment. Digital systems can make the network visible. Then somebody still has to dig. PFAS changes the economics of water quality. The Commission estimates health impacts associated with persistent pollutants, such as PFAS in EU waters, at €52 billion to €84 billion each year. That is a public health liability wearing a chemical name tag. The problem is awkward because prevention, monitoring, and cleanup hit different pockets. A manufacturer may have produced the chemical. A water utility may have to treat the water. A household may pay the bill. A health system may carry the disease burden. A regulator may discover the problem late and then insist everyone moves quickly. That is how external costs become public costs. First, they vanish into soil and water. Then they reappear as capex, litigation, medical treatment, and angry meetings in municipal halls. The same pattern appears with sewage. England's storm overflows declined in 2025 compared with 2024, helped by drier weather and full event duration monitoring. The official data still left the country talking about almost 300,000 spill events. That is a lot of sewage for a success story. Storm overflows have a technical role. In heavy rain, they stop sewers backing up into homes by releasing excess flow. The problem comes when a safety valve turns into routine operating practice. Then, the river becomes the overflow plan. Fixing that requires sewer separation, storage, treatment capacity, sustainable drainage, land, roadworks, and time. It also requires honest communication with the public. People can understand engineering trade-offs. They are less patient with companies that discover moral seriousness too late. Europe's water pressure also runs in opposite directions at the same time. Drought and scarcity on one side, flooding and overwhelmed drainage on the other. Too little water in the soil, too much water in the street. The same city can face both across a single year. That is the maddening part of climate adaptation. The old mental map breaks. A region that floods in winter can still face water stress in summer. A wet year can hide weak storage. A dry spring can drain the margin before the first heat wave arrives. Southern Europe knows this already. Seasonal water stress has become a hard operating condition for agriculture, tourism, cities, and ecosystems. Irrigation demand rises when heat damages crops. Tourist demand rises when heat pulls people to coasts and islands. Urban demand rises as residents try to stay cool. River flows fall just as everyone wants more. Hotels want showers. Farmers want irrigation. Cities want parks alive. Power systems want cooling. Nature wants enough water to remain nature. That is a basin-level fight over priority, price, and political nerve. Northern and Western Europe can learn faster or pay later. The southeast of England gives Europe a neat warning because it is wealthy, densely populated, growth-hungry, and water-stressed. Housing targets, industrial demand, agriculture, chalk streams, aging networks, and dry springs all meet in the same pipe. A housing development without credible water capacity is a future complaint in brick form. The developer may sell and leave. The local authority may change leadership. The utility remains with the connection duty, the stressed catchment, and the customer calls. This is why water must sit earlier in planning. New homes, energy projects, industrial parks, and digital infrastructure need water checks at the start, when land is optioned and designs are still changeable. Bringing water in late creates delay, redesign, legal fight, local anger, and higher financing costs. Developers hate uncertainty. Lenders hate it more. A project delayed by grid capacity is familiar territory now. A project delayed by water capacity will become more familiar. The queue is not always at the substation. Water resilience also forces governments to choose between three unpopular actions: build more, charge more, and control demand. Each one creates a constituency of opposition. Build a reservoir, and the land fight begins. Upgrade sewers, and streets are dug up. Raise bills, and household budgets protest. Meter use and privacy questions arrive. Restrict irrigation, and farmers push back. Cut leakage, and companies need crews, parts, and money. Control pollution, and industrial users ask for transition time. Adaptation will hurt somewhere. The best offer is competent delivery, fair cost sharing, and better timing. That offer will not fit on a campaign leaflet. For utilities, the message is direct. Operational weakness will be punished faster in hotter conditions. A small margin becomes a public failure when demand spikes. A poor emergency plan becomes a political story when vulnerable customers do not get bottled water. A maintenance backlog becomes visible when a treatment work stumbles. For lenders, water should now be treated as a regulated infrastructure credit, with climate exposure, social anger, and policy risk sitting inside the same envelope. Allowed returns matter. So do fines, enforcement, service performance, river quality, customer legitimacy, and the company's ability to deliver capex without drowning in its own procurement plan. For governments, the choice is sharper. They can keep treating water as a periodic scandal, or they can treat it as national economic infrastructure. The first option produces inquiries, apologies, and emergency pallets of bottled water. The second requires long permits, public argument, and serious budgets. For technology providers and contractors, the market is opening. Leakage detection, pressure management, wastewater treatment, PFAS removal, smart metering, catchment monitoring, stormwater systems, membranes, pumps, asset inspection, civil works, and nature-based flood measures all have a role. The winners will be the firms that can prove performance in messy public networks, beyond pilot sites with smiling photographs. For off-takers and water-heavy businesses, the lesson is harsher. Water risk belongs in site choice, procurement, insurance, and board reporting. A factory without reliable water is a stranded asset with better lighting. A data center without local consent is a planning dispute with servers attached. And for households, the politics needs more honesty. People are right to be angry when companies fail. People are right to expect clean rivers and reliable supply. People also need to know that replacing the assets, treating the pollutants, and adapting to climate stress will cost an increasing amount of money. The public deserves a cleaner bargain. Higher bills should buy visible delivery. Fewer leaks, fewer outages, cleaner rivers, better incident response, more storage, smarter demand management, and stronger protection for vulnerable customers. If companies miss targets, penalties should bite. If executives want bonuses, performance should arrive first. Radical idea, apparently, but we all know that's how it works. Europe's water bill is arriving because the weather has changed, demand has grown, pollution has accumulated, and infrastructure has aged. The old comfort was that water would keep appearing, because it always had. That comfort is breaking. The serious response starts by naming water as a strategic constraint. Every growth plan needs a water line. Industrial policy needs a catchment map. A housing target needs supply and wastewater capacity. Any business plan needs climate stress inside the numbers. Utility regulators need enough power to make failure expensive. At this stage, the commercial lesson is clear. Adaptation is moving from policy language into utility bills and project finance. It is leaving the conference panel and entering the household direct debit, the bond covenant, the planning condition, the reservoir inquiry, and the procurement file. Water sounds simple and remains an assumed right until it fails. Then it becomes the whole economy in liquid form. The taps in southeast England gave Europe a distant warning. A rich region can still run short. A regulated monopoly can still lose trust. A hot week can still strip the varnish off years of underinvestment. And a climate risk that once sat in a strategy document can end up in a queue for bottled water beside a littered car park. Europe can do water much better than treating it as an invisible service that should remain cheap, clean, and constant without much public argument. Europe now must accept the physical terms and conditions for keeping water as a quality public resource for future generations. Pipes, pumps, reservoirs, sewers, treatment works, catchments, meters, chemicals, sludge, debt, bills, permits, and trust. Well, that's a wrap on our 74th GreenWave podcast episode. Thank you for sharing your time and attention with us. You can find the GreenWave podcast on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Podbean, Spotify, iHeart, Podchaser, Boomplay, and Player FM. Please share the episodes with friends and colleagues and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy the work we are doing each week to bring you above replacement value content. You can also follow Synergy International on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, or visit us directly at synergy-international.net. Until next time, keep riding the green wave of sustainability.